Moses has had it. The people of Israel have been freed from slavery, but the price of their freedom is costly. It almost seems like it's too costly for them to deal with. All this wandering around in the wilderness with nothing but a steady diet of manna to eat. Memories of their time as slaves in Egypt seem pretty good. Very good, in fact. We used to have such wonderful things to eat. Fish, the choicest of vegetables and fruits, and all for free. We can't take it anymore, Moses. We're sick and tired of looking at this manna. The people of Israel are angry. Moses is angry. And the Lord is angry. Things can't get any worse. Moses is convinced that his servant leader role isn't really working. And he shares his concern with God in no uncertain terms. Where have I gone wrong, Lord? I'm carrying the burden of this huge number of people on my shoulders, and I don't feel like you're helping me very much right now. They come to me asking for gourmet food. What am I supposed to do? I just can't do this all by myself. The burden is simply too heavy. So God responds. Moses gathers 70 elders before the Lord, and the Lord takes some of the Spirit that's on Moses and puts it on the 70 elders. They begin to prophesy, to interpret and proclaim God's vision, God's message to the people. The Spirit of God also affects two other men, Eldad and Medad, who remain in the camp, who don't go with Moses to the tent of meeting. But not everybody's happy about the appearance that Eldad and Medad are doing God's work. Some are so upset by this unauthorized ministry that they try to get Moses to stop them. In the account, Joshua, who's Moses' sort of executive officer, is the spokesman. Make them stop is his solution. But Moses refuses. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his Spirit on them. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets. What's Moses saying? Surely he can't really mean that every single person of Israel should aspire to the job of the prophet. If too many cooks spoil the broth, surely too many prophets would spoil the community of faith. It's like saying that everyone should be a priest or that everyone should be a bishop. Besides, God asked Moses to gather 70 elders. What Eldad and Medad are doing is improper. They've not gone through the proper channels. Moses must be just so frustrated with being the only one speaking for God that he exaggerates. His exclamation is a classic example of hyperbole, born of desperation. Or is it? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets. Is this plea of Moses itself prophetic? Do his words reflect God's dream for the community of faith? Mark tells us that this tendency to want to confine, to exclude, to draw boundaries and circles didn't end with the Israelites in the wilderness. It was front and center with the disciples as well. John, one of the inner circles of disciples, goes to Jesus with the same idea as Joshua went to Moses. Here are these folks who are not part of our group, not part of our set of followers. And look what they're doing. Make them stop. And then Jesus has the same reaction, more or less, as Moses. Don't stop them. For no one who does a deed of power in my name will be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. Whoever is not against us is for us. When a person is baptized in the Episcopal Church, we welcome that person into the Christian community with these words. We receive you into the household of God, confess the faith of Christ crucified, proclaim his resurrection, and share with us in his eternal priesthood. When we welcome a new Christian into our midst, we're saying what it means to be a member of God's family. To be a Christian means that we're called to bear witness to the crucified and risen Christ. To be a Christian means to be a part of a priestly community, a community that mediates between God and the world. Every baptized person, we believe, is a priestly person. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put His Spirit on them. Through baptism, all of us are made God's ministers. Through baptism, all of us are made God's prophets. Through baptism, all of us are filled with God's Spirit. Through baptism, all of us are empowered to interpret God's vision and message to the people around us. What would it be like for an entire community of faith to share the burden of leadership? Imagine it. Everyone has been touched by God's Spirit. Everyone has a call to ministry. Not just the dozen or so people on the vestry, not just the clergy, but everyone. Everyone exercising whatever ministry is their calling. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put His Spirit on them. Moses saw something more in his call than the need to delegate authority and responsibility. He wanted the people of Israel to become the community of faith that would be a blessing to all people and nations. He wanted each person to share the burden and the gift of interpreting God's Word. Moses shared the dream of God, the dream of God's Spirit being poured out on every human being, the dream that all God's daughters and sons would prophesy. And that dream inches more and more close to reality each time we live into our responsibility as members of God's household, each time we share in the priesthood of the community of faith. Each of us, every person here, each of us is called to some form of ministry in this community. I don't know what yours is. Are you called to be a singer? Are you called to be a cook for pads? Are you called to be a reader or a teacher or an acolyte or an usher or a greeter or someone who builds homes at Habitat? Whatever your particular calling, it's right for you. We are, each of us, God's ministers, God's priests, and God's prophets. And the Spirit of the Lord is upon us.